James had always believed that life with Sarah was like a fairy tale. They had been married for 5 years, having met in college, where their shared love for literature sparked an instant connection. Together, they built a life filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect. But life, James would soon learn, had a way of throwing unexpected curveballs. It was a crisp autumn morning when James first noticed the change in Sarah. She seemed distant, her usual sparkling eyes clouded with an unspoken burden. She was spending more time on her phone, whispering conversations into the receiver, and often coming home late with vague excuses about work. James, though concerned, trusted her implicitly. After all, trust was the foundation of their relationship. One evening, curiosity got the better of him. As Sarah was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The name Ethan flashed on the screen. A chill ran down James's spine. Ethan was a colleague of Sarah's, someone she had mentioned in passing. The message preview read, "I miss you." James felt a lump form in his throat, but he told himself it must be a misunderstanding. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah's behavior only became more suspicious. The emotional distance between them grew, and James's anxiety gnawed at him. He decided to follow her after work one day. His heart pounded as he watched Sarah leave her office and drive to a quaint cafe on the outskirts of town. James parked his car and walked to the window, where he saw Sarah with Ethan, their heads close together, sharing a moment that seemed far too intimate for just friends. James's world shattered. He stumbled back to his car, tears blurring his vision. The woman he loved more than anything was cheating on him. The betrayal was a knife to his heart, and he felt an overwhelming mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. Why? Why would she do this to them? James confronted Sarah that night. His voice trembled as he recounted what he had seen. Sarah's face drained of color, and she broke down, confessing everything. She admitted that she had been feeling neglected, that their once vibrant connection had faded into routine and complacency. Ethan had been there to listen, to make her feel alive again. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she sobbed. "I never wanted to hurt you, James. I'm so sorry." James felt a storm of emotions. He wanted to scream, to lash out, but seeing Sarah so broken, he found himself aching for the love they once shared. He walked out, needing space to think. The next few days were a blur of pain and soul-searching. He spent nights on friends' couches, contemplating the life they had built and the dreams they had shared. One night, as he sat by the river where he and Sarah had their first date, James realized that despite the betrayal, he still loved her. Their relationship was worth fighting for. But he needed Sarah to understand the depth of his hurt and the seriousness of her actions. He decided to see a marriage counselor, hoping they could rebuild their fractured relationship. James approached Sarah with the idea. She agreed, tears streaming down her face, clinging to the hope that they could mend what was broken. Their first few sessions were difficult, with raw emotions and painful truths laid bare. Sarah apologized repeatedly, expressing her deep remorse and commitment to making things right. James shared his feelings of betrayal and his fears for their future. Slowly, through counseling, they began to understand each other better. James realized that he had taken Sarah for granted, becoming complacent in their relationship. Sarah recognized that her actions had been a cry for help, but also a betrayal of their vows. They learned to communicate openly, to express their needs and fears without judgment. One evening, after months of hard work and soul-searching, they revisited the cafe where James had first discovered the affair. This time, they sat together, holding hands, talking about their journey. It was a symbolic gesture, a way of reclaiming a place of pain and transforming it into a place of healing. James looked into Sarah's eyes, now filled with the familiar sparkle he had missed. "I forgive you," he said softly, "but trust will take time to rebuild. I need you to be patient with me, with us." Sarah nodded, tears of relief and gratitude streaming down her cheeks. "I understand. And I will do whatever it takes to make things right." Their journey was far from over, but they were on the path to healing. They rediscovered their love for each other, built on a foundation of renewed trust and open communication. James and Sarah made a promise to never let complacency creep into their relationship again. They learned to cherish each other, to prioritize their marriage, and to always be honest, no matter how difficult it might be. Years later, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, James reflected on their journey. The betrayal had almost destroyed them, but it had also led to a deeper, more resilient love. They had faced the storm together, and come out stronger on the other side. Their story, once marred by pain and betrayal, had transformed into one of forgiveness, growth, and unwavering love. In the end, James realized that love was not just about the fairy tale moments, but about weathering the storms together and coming out stronger. And as he held Sarah close, he knew that their love story was more beautiful than any fairy tale. Because it was real, imperfect, and deeply, profoundly human. Rain poured down in torrents, drenching the streets and masking the footsteps of a figure moving stealthily through the night. The dim light of a street lamp flickered, casting eerie shadows on the wet pavement. Inside a luxurious but eerily quiet suburban home, Mark sat in the darkened living room, his heart pounding in his chest. His hand trembled as he clutched a crumpled piece of paper, an anonymous note delivered to his office earlier that day. It simply read, "She is meeting him tonight. Follow her." Mark's mind raced with thoughts he didn't want to entertain. His wife, Sarah, had been distant lately, more absorbed in her phone, frequent late nights at work, and a newfound interest in girls' nights out. But he had dismissed his fears as baseless paranoia, until now. The front door creaked open, and Sarah stepped inside, drenched from the rain. She froze when she saw Mark sitting in the dark, his eyes boring into her with an intensity she had never seen before. "Mark, what are you doing up?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but failing miserably as her voice quivered. "Where were you, Sarah?" Mark's voice was low, dangerously calm. "I told you, I was out with the girls," she replied, avoiding his gaze as she removed her wet coat. Mark stood up, his eyes never leaving hers. "Stop lying to me," he hissed, throwing the crumpled note at her feet. "Who is he?" Sarah's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, tears welled up in her eyes, and she sank to the floor, the weight of her guilt crushing her. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Mark," she finally whispered. "It was a mistake. I'm so sorry." Mark's world shattered. The woman he had loved and trusted more than anything had betrayed him. He wanted to scream, to lash out, but all he could do was stare at her in disbelief, his heart breaking into pieces. The story flashes back to the beginning of their relationship, how they met in college, fell madly in love, and built a life together. Mark remembers their wedding day, the way Sarah looked at him with so much love in her eyes. He remembers the promises they made to each other, the dreams they shared. But those memories are now tainted by the reality of her betrayal. Sarah sobs uncontrollably, confessing everything. She tells Mark how she felt neglected, how she thought he no longer loved her, how she sought comfort in the arms of another man. But as the words spill out, it becomes clear that Sarah herself is broken, consumed by guilt, regret, and the realization that she has destroyed the very thing she cherished most. Mark is torn between his love for Sarah and the pain of her betrayal. He wants to forgive her, to hold her and tell her everything will be okay, but the wound is too deep. The trust they once had is gone, and he doesn't know if it can ever be repaired. In the final moments, Mark makes a heartbreaking decision. He tells Sarah that he needs time to think, to heal, and that she should leave. The words cut through the silence like a knife, leaving both of them devastated. As Sarah packs her things, Mark watches, tears streaming down his face. He wants to stop her, to take it all back, but he knows that things can never go back to the way they were. As the door closes behind her, Mark collapses onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The love of his life is gone, and he is left alone, drowning in his sorrow. The rain continues to fall outside, echoing the tears that stream down Mark's face. He sits in the darkness, haunted by memories of what once was, and the painful reality of what now is. Love alone cannot sustain a relationship marred by repeated betrayals and broken promises. True commitment requires trust, honesty, and mutual respect. When one partner continually undermines the foundation of trust, it is essential for the other to prioritize their own well-being and that of their children. This story reminds us that self-respect and the courage to break free from toxic cycles are crucial for finding true happiness and stability. Carla had been with Simon for 15 years, married for 5. Their relationship, once filled with the promise of everlasting love, had turned into a cycle of heartbreak and betrayal. Carla, a dedicated wife and mother, was currently pregnant with their second child, a son. Their daughter, Lily, was the light of Carla's life, a beacon of hope in her increasingly tumultuous marriage. Simon had always been charming, the kind of man who could make anyone feel special, but his charm was a double-edged sword. Despite his assurances of fidelity, he had a penchant for emotional affairs, a betrayal that cut Carla deeply. She tried to rationalize it, telling herself that at least he wasn't physically cheating. But the emotional distance he created left her feeling isolated and unloved. The worst times were during her pregnancies. Doctors' orders and complications meant she couldn't be as physically affectionate with Simon as she wanted to be, and Simon used this as an excuse to seek emotional connections elsewhere. He claimed it was her fault for questioning him, for wanting to understand why he betrayed her. Their arguments spiraled into blame games, with Simon always positioning himself as the victim of Carla's distrust. Carla's heart ached with each new discovery of Simon's infidelity. She wanted to believe his promises to change, to be better, to stop hurting her. Each time she took him back, hoping that this time would be different. But it never was. The most recent affair was the hardest to swallow. It was with a woman Simon had cheated with before, a painful reminder of his past betrayals. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, Carla sat on the porch, her mind racing with the familiar turmoil. The summer breeze did little to calm her nerves as she thought about the future of her family. She loved Simon deeply, but her love was being suffocated by his continuous betrayals. Simon found her there, lost in thought. He approached with a cautious look, knowing that his recent actions had pushed Carla to her breaking point. "Carla," he began softly, "we need to talk." Carla looked up, her eyes tired and filled with unshed tears. "What is there to talk about, Simon? You keep promising you'll change, but you never do." He sat down beside her, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. "I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep doing this. I guess I'm scared of losing you." scared of losing me. Carla's voice was incredulous. You push me away every time you cheat. How do you think that makes me feel? Simon sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't want to fight, Carla. I want to make this work. For us, for Lily, and for our son. Then why can't you stop? Carla's voice cracked. Why isn't our family enough for you? Simon didn't have an answer, and the silence between them grew heavy. Finally, Carla spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't keep doing this, Simon. I can't keep living in this cycle of hurt. The days passed in a blur. Carla tried to focus on her pregnancy and caring for Lily, but Simon's infidelity was a constant shadow over her. One afternoon, while Lily was at a playdate, Carla decided to confront Simon again. She needed answers, closure, something to help her make sense of the chaos. Simon, we need to talk. Really talk, she said, standing in the doorway of his study. He looked up from his work, his expression wary. All right, let's start. Carla took a deep breath, steadying herself. Do you love me, Simon? Truly love me? Of course I do, Carla. You know that. Then why do you keep hurting me? Why do you keep going back to her? Her voice was filled with pain. Simon looked down, unable to meet her gaze. I don't know, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. For what? Marriage, family? Carla's heart ached. If you can't commit to us, then what are we doing here? I want to commit, I do. But every time we fight, every time you question me, I feel like I'm failing. And I run. Carla's tears flowed freely now. I can't keep living like this, Simon. I need to know if you're willing to change, truly change. Because if not, I don't think I can stay. Simon stood up, crossing the room to stand in front of her. He gently wiped away her tears. I want to change, Carla. I want to be the man you deserve. But I need your help. Help? Carla's voice was a mix of hope and skepticism. How can I help you when you're the one breaking us apart? By believing in me. By giving me one last chance. Carla looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity. This is your last chance, Simon. One more betrayal, and we're done. The months that followed were a tentative dance of rebuilding trust. Simon attended therapy, working on his issues, and Carla tried to believe in his promises once more. But the scars of his past actions ran deep, and every time he was late or distant, her anxiety flared. One evening, as Carla was preparing dinner, Simon came home looking troubled. We need to talk, he said, his voice tense. Carla's heart sank. What is it now? I saw her today. She wanted to talk, to apologize. And did you? Carla's voice trembled. I didn't meet her, I walked away. But it made me realize something. What? That I can't keep doing this to you. To us, I need to be honest with you, and with myself. Carla felt a glimmer of hope. So, what does that mean? It means I'm going to keep trying. For you, for Lily, for our son, but I need you to know that it's a process, and I might stumble. Carla nodded, her emotions a tangled mess. I appreciate your honesty, Simon. But remember, this is your last chance. As their son was born, Carla and Simon tried to rebuild their life together. There were moments of joy, but the underlying tension of past betrayals never fully disappeared. Simon's efforts to change were genuine, but the damage was done. Carla found herself constantly on edge, waiting for the next heartbreak. One fateful day, Carla discovered a message on Simon's phone. It was innocent enough, but it was from the same woman. Her world shattered all over again. She confronted Simon, tears streaming down her face. You promised, Simon. You promised this was your last chance. Simon looked devastated. Carla, it's not what you think. She reached out, But I didn't respond. I can't keep living like this, the constant fear, the distrust, it's tearing me apart. Please, Carla, I love you, I don't want to lose you. But Carla had reached her breaking point. I love you too, Simon. But I need to love myself and our children more. With a heavy heart, Carla made the decision to leave. She packed her things, took Lily and their newborn son, and walked out the door. Simon watched them go, his heart breaking, knowing that his actions had led to this. As Carla drove away, she felt a mixture of sorrow and relief. She had loved Simon with everything in her, but she couldn't continue to sacrifice her happiness and well-being. She knew it would be difficult, but she was determined to build a better future for herself and her children, one free from the cycle of hurt and betrayal. In the end, the illusion of forever was shattered, leaving behind the reality that sometimes love isn't enough to overcome the damage done.